How a powder keg 40 years in the making finally exploded *** on June 28, 1914, a 19-year-old with a failing lung, a cyanide pill that didn't work, and a pistol he'd barely trained with, stepped into a Sarajevo street. He wasn't aiming to start a world war. He was aiming to kill one man. By the time the smoke cleared, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was dead, and within 5 weeks, so was the 19th century world. Here's the part most people never hear. Diplomats had been calling the Balkans the powder keg of Europe for years before this assassination ever happened. Military planners on every side had already drawn up mobilization timetables down to the day. So the real question isn't just how one bullet caused World War I. It's why Europe was so primed to explode that almost any spark would have done the same. Historians studying the causes of World War I usually point to 4 forces reinforcing each other at once: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. After German unification in 1871, achieved partly by defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War, Europe entered an arms race unlike anything before it. Germany began building a navy to rival Britain's, the foundation of the British Empire. Britain answered in 1906 with the Dreadnought, a battleship so advanced it made every existing warship obsolete overnight. Germany matched it. Britain matched that. On land, standing armies swelled to millions of men, and general staffs built rigid mobilization plans so complex that once started, they were almost impossible to reverse. Alongside the arms race came the alliance system. Germany bound itself to Austria. Hungary, France partnered with Russia. Britain moved closer to both. These alliances were meant to deter war by making it too costly to start. Instead, they guaranteed that no local conflict could stay local. Imperial rivalry added more fuel. Europe's great powers were racing to divide the entire globe, and colonial competition in Africa and Morocco had already produced 2 major diplomatic crises before 1914, pushing Britain and France closer together and convincing Germany the other powers wanted it boxed in. But the fastest burning fuse was nationalism, and nowhere more than in the Balkans, where a declining Ottoman Empire had left a power vacuum that rival nationalist movements were racing to fill. The Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 left Serbia larger, bolder, and openly committed to uniting South Slavic peoples, including those still ruled by Austria-Hungary. For Vienna, an empire built from a patchwork of nationalities, that dream was an existential threat. That's the context most summaries skip. Gavrilo Princip's assassination of Franz Ferdinand wasn't a random act. It was the product of a nationalist movement Austria-Hungary had been bracing against for years, and Vienna used it as the excuse to finally act. Austria-Hungary wanted Germany's backing before confronting Serbia, fearing Russian intervention. Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm Roman II gave it the infamous blank check, an unconditional promise of support. On July 23, Austria-Hungary issued Serbia an ultimatum so severe that many historians believe it was designed to be rejected. Serbia accepted nearly everything, refusing only the one demand that violated its sovereignty. Austria-Hungary declared war anyway on July 28, exactly 1 month after the killing. Russia, unwilling to abandon its ally, began mobilizing, and because partial mobilization was logistically unworkable, the Tsar ordered full mobilization instead. To Germany, that confirmed its worst fear, encirclement. Germany's strategy for exactly this scenario, the Schlieffen Plan, banked on Russia mobilizing slowly. The plan called for a rapid knockout of France first, through neutral Belgium, before turning east. Germany declared war on Russia on August 1 and France on August 3. The next day, German troops crossed into Belgium, a country Britain had guaranteed neutrality for since 1839. That single decision is what pulled Britain into the war. On August 4, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. In 11 days, an assassination in the Balkans had become a war between every major power in Europe. The Schlieffen Plan needed 6 weeks. German forces drove deep into France before being stopped at the Battle of the Marne that September. Both sides dug in, and the trenches that followed would stretch nearly 500 miles. For 3 years, the Western Front barely moved while chemical weapons, machine guns, and industrial artillery turned battles like Verdun and the Somme into some of the deadliest in human history. The Eastern Front told a more complicated story than simple Russian weakness. Russian forces invaded East Prussia faster than Germany expected, forcing Berlin to divert troops away from the West at the worst possible moment, even after Germany's crushing victory at Tannenberg. In 1916, Russian General Alexei Brusilov launched an offensive that shattered Austro-Hungarian lines and forced Germany to pull divisions off Verdun to save its ally, easing pressure on France exactly when it needed it most. Russia paid an almost incomprehensible price for these efforts, a war effort that would eventually break the country entirely. This had also become a genuinely global war. Japan seized German territory in Asia and the Pacific. The Ottoman Empire entered on Germany's side, opening fronts across the Middle East, where oil and the Suez Canal carried strategic weight. The failed Gallipoli campaign tried and failed to knock the Ottomans out. Italy switched sides in 1915 for promised territory, launching a dozen costly offensives along the Isonzo River. And in Africa, colonial campaigns dragged on for years, sustained by hundreds of thousands of conscripted porters, whose deaths from disease and exhaustion rarely make it into the popular story at all. This was also an economic war. Britain's naval blockade slowly starved Germany, producing the infamous Turnip Winter of 1916 to 1917, and killing hundreds of thousands of German civilians through malnutrition. Germany answered with unrestricted submarine warfare, sinking Allied shipping, including neutral vessels, a gamble that risked provoking the one power still on the sidelines, the United States. That risk paid off against Germany. British intelligence intercepted the Zimmermann telegram, a secret German proposal for an alliance with Mexico against America. When it became public in early 1917, it transformed American public opinion. The United States declared war that April, permanently shifting the balance of the conflict. Russia broke first. Bread shortages and war exhaustion triggered the February Revolution of 1917, forcing Tsar Nicholas Roman II to abdicate. By October, the Bolsheviks under Vladimir Lenin had seized power, promising peace. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk pulled Russia out of the war in March 1918, at a staggering cost, a third of its population and vast territories signed away. Germany rushed troops west for one final gamble in the spring of 1918, racing to win before American reinforcements arrived in full strength. It came close, then ran out of momentum. By autumn, the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, and finally Germany itself had all collapsed or signed armistices. The war that began with one empire's patience running out ended with 4 empires gone entirely. Woodrow Wilson's 14 points had promised self-determination, but the peace that followed applied that principle selectively. Britain and France had already secretly agreed in the Sykes-Picot Agreement to divide the Ottoman Middle East between themselves, carving borders that still shape the region's politics today. The Treaty of Versailles placed formal blame on Germany and demanded heavy reparations, a settlement many Germans experienced as humiliation, though historians now stress that economic collapse and political failure in the 1930s mattered just as much as the treaty itself. The war's official death toll runs from 16 to 20 million. But its deadliest legacy wasn't a battle. Troops and refugees crossing a war-shattered world carried a new strain of influenza that became the Spanish flu, killing an estimated 50 million people, roughly 3 times the war's own toll. One bullet in Sarajevo didn't destroy the old world by itself. 4 decades of arms races, alliances, empire, and nationalism had already built the conditions for it. All that bullet did was prove the powder keg was real.